When the Winged Hussars arrived is the story of the charge of the Polish Hussars during the Battle of Vienna on the 12th of September 1683, pitting the forces of the Ottoman Empire against the Catholic League of the Holy Roman Empire, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and their allies. In 1450 the Ottomans only controlled large parts of Turkey, but soon they expanded outwards, and by 1683 they controlled large parts of North Africa, the Middle East, Arabia, and had expanded into Eastern Europe as well. With this expansion they came very close to the Holy Roman Imperial city of Vienna, and this was a key target of Ottoman expansion. In 1529 the Ottomans were repulsed from the walls of the city, although this earlier failure didn't deter them, and by 1683 they had allied themselves with Protestant Hungarians and other dissidents against the Habsburgs as well as the Tartars, and prepared themselves for a final push against the city. In the wake of another Ottoman push into Europe, the King of Poland, Jan Sobieski, allied himself with the Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I, and together they prepared troops to defend the city, which came under Ottoman siege on the 14th of July 1683, encircling the city and blockading food from entering the garrison, who started to starve. Now during the siege the Ottomans dug tunnels beneath the city walls, although the defenders came out to meet them underground, and battles were fought in the attempts to keep out the Ottomans from entering the city. Now the troops of the Imperial and Polish Confederacy had to act quickly because the city was running out of food. Some estimates put the city's garrison as being outnumbered as much as 15-1, so speed was of the essence. Despite the Ottoman forces outnumbering the relief force by at least 50,000 men, the Imperial and Polish troops had a secret weapon, and these were the Polish Hussaria. Now the Hussaria were a heavy cavalry. They were known as the Winged Hussars, because as you can see they wore wings on the backs of their armour. Now one theory for this is to stop blows coming at them from the back. Another is that they made such a noise when they charged that it seems that there were 5 times as many cavalry as there actually were, and yet another was that it blocked the sound of the noises that the Ottomans would make with wood and clappers and things to scare the horses, so that the horses were deaf to them and would charge fiercely into any enemy. Now the Hussaria were made of the Szlachta, who were the Polish nobility, and several Szlachta together, the towarzysz, would form a budget, which was a retinue, or also literally meaning a lance. And many of these budgets together would form the Chorągiew Husarska, a company of hussars. Now the hussars were well armed. They had several different weapons. The budget, for example, the famous lance, which they attached the Polish colours of red and white to, as well as a stabbing sword called the kończyk, which was used, as well as the szabla, a proper sabre. And sometimes they carried pistols as well, many which they fired just before charging, and also some had arquebuses, which in Polish are known as the bandolet. These were the elite troops of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and they were the reason that the Polish were able to hold their own against different forces like the Russians and the Austrians variably throughout this period of history, changing the course of many decisive battles despite being outnumbered. And it's this troop that the Polish and the Imperial army hoped would give them the edge over the vastly numerically superior Ottoman army at the siege of Vienna. Now the Winged Hussars' favourite tactic was to ride in fairly loose formation, quite at a canter towards an enemy position, and just before breaking into the full charge they would smash together into a much closer compact formation and then charge through an enemy, and invariably this worked to great effect on the battlefield against the enemies of Poland. Now it's before the battle that they met, and they arrived on the 12th of September at the gates of Vienna, where the large Ottoman army was besieging the city. On top of the Kahlenberg, this large mountain on top of Vienna, they lit bonfires to let the inhabitants of the city know that their time of need would soon be over, and that a great battle would be fought that day. And a battle would indeed be fought. At 4 in the morning, the first advances started, with Imperial troops advancing on the left. Despite facing counterattacks from the Turks, they were able to advance and take the little towns of Nussdorf and Heiligenstadt. All the while the Janissaries, the elite troops of the Ottomans, were still encircling Vienna, and they concentrated on smashing through the gates because they knew that the relief army was there, so they wanted to capture the city while some of the Ottoman forces held back the Polish and the Imperial troops. However, the Imperial troops on the left flank were able to break through and capture the 2 towns of Nussdorf and Heiligenstadt. Now at this point in the battle, the Ottoman Janissaries besieging Vienna dug under the ground and planted 10 mines with the intention of blowing up the walls so that their troops could stream through. However, it was a race against time for the Austrian inhabitants of the city to find and defuse them, and by some miracle they were able to find all 10 and defuse them before the Janissaries were able to breach the city, thus saving the city while the relief forces were battling through the Ottoman flanks. At this stage, the Polish-Lithuanian infantry started to advance through the centre, moving in to attack the area around Gersdorf. Meanwhile, the Janissaries surrounding the city made another attack after their failed attempt with the mines had failed to detonate. It's at this stage that the Turks, just in front of their great fortification called the Türkenschanz, fortified the city of Döbling, which is split into the two towns of Unterdöbling and Oberdöbling. However, the imperial troops on the left flank now made for a full assault against this position, and after some heavy fighting, they were indeed able to knock the Turks back from this, thus splitting the Turkish force in half and trapping them between the Poles who were coming through the centre near Gersdorf and their own imperial troops in the north. It's at this stage, when the attack on Döbling is carrying forth and the Türkenschanz looks like it's under threat, that the Winged Hussars come out of the forest and they are met with cheers from the infantry, because they know the decisive phase of the battle is about to begin. Sensing that a decisive breakthrough is near, the imperial forces in the north went for a full-out assault on the Türkenschanz. They were met with very fierce Ottoman counterattacks on their imperial infantry, but they pushed on nonetheless. And to the south they could see that the Polish cavalry and imperial troops supporting them were also moving into position. It's at this point, with one of the Winged Hussars units being led by the King of Poland himself, Jan Sobieski, that the largest cavalry charge in recorded history and that has ever occurred on Earth to this point, and probably we will never see a larger cavalry charge given the fact that horses are no longer really used in combat as much, where 18,000 Polish Winged Hussars and Polish cavalry and Imperial cavalry charged into the Ottoman flank, really creating the decisive moment in the siege of Vienna. Now, of course, this was such a huge moment in the battle that the Ottomans were not able to hold back against this, and with the Imperial infantry attacking the Türkenschanz in the north, and now the joint cavalry of the Imperial and Polish being led by the Winged Hussars charging down the mountainside with fire and steel breaking through the Ottoman ranks, this really caused the main Ottoman army to flee, especially after the defenders of Vienna, the garrison, sallied out from the gates and attacked them in the rear. The Ottoman army was finally and truly broken during this great attack. Now, Jan Sobieski led his troops right into the Ottoman camp. The Emir Pasha had to flee from this camp because it was completely overrun by the cavalry charge that just swept away everything in its path. It was truly devastating, and all of the main tactic of the Winged Hussars really spearheaded this much larger charge. There were only about 3,000 Winged Hussars on the battlefield, whereas there were 18,000 other cavalry right behind them charging through the Ottoman ranks. And this is the point where the Battle of Vienna, and possibly the Battle of Europe against the Turks who had been coming in and invading places like the Balkans and Eastern Europe for hundreds of years, this was a huge turning point, and this cavalry charge really is the pinnacle of that turning point against the Turkish advance into Europe. Now, it's after the battle that Jan Sobieski, he really went on and started to attack other places that the Turks had in Eastern Europe, parts of Hungary, as well as the Holy Roman Emperor. They both went and attacked the Turks and really retook areas of the Balkans, of Hungary, and this was really the beginning of the end for the Ottoman Empire, especially their ambitions in Europe. They had a few ups and downs afterwards, but they would never come to the gates of Vienna again. That was the furthest that they really went. So the Ottoman casualties during the siege of Vienna. Well, during the actual siege itself, they lost 20,000 men, so this is them trying to break into the city. Then on the 12th of September, the battle itself, they lost around 15,000 men. And they had about 5,000 men captured. So all told, around 40,000 casualties, which was a huge amount considering the army that marched out was 170,000 strong to begin with, and now it had been completely depleted by the siege and the battle. It was a large blow against the Ottomans. The Polish casualties during the charge were 1,300 dead, largely cavalry and the infantry that they had sent through the centre. The Imperial casualties were 2,200 dead and wounded during the battle, and in the siege 12,000 died, which is of course a large amount, lots of them being civilians, as well as the soldiers guarding the walls who died from lack of food and from being killed during the siege, that kind of thing. For the Ottomans, of course, their baggage trains were largely captured, and during the retreat they were harried the entire way by not just the Winged Hussars but also the other troops, as well as some of the Tartars who were fighting on the side of the Commonwealth against the Turks. And really, by the 1690s, they would never, after that stage, attack Vienna. And it's really that the Polish and the imperial troops would march into Eastern Europe and recapture the places that the Turks had got earlier. Alright everyone, so thank you very much for watching. This has been my video about when the Winged Hussars arrive. Now please do let me know what you think in the comment section below. I know people have been wanting this one for a long time, and apologies it's taken me so long, but I wanted to do it justice because it's such an epic battle. Now I do actually have another video about this coming out, although it's got a slightly different twist on it, but I guess you'll have to wait and see for that one. So thank you very much for watching. I have been History with Hilbert, and this has been the Siege of Vienna, when the Winged Hussars arrive.